Ether Academy wasn't just a high school, it was a gleaming testament to ambition. Its walls of polished glass and steel reflected the relentless drive for excellence that permeated every lecture hall and laboratory. Here, in the heart of a bustling, nameless city, intellectual prowess was the currency, and the pursuit of STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics was practically a religion. Students, uniformly bright and often burdened by the weight of parental expectations, moved through its sleek, minimalist corridors with a determined stride, their faces etched with the familiar tension of academic pressure. The air crackled with the silent hum of cutting-edge equipment, a constant reminder of the future being forged within these hallowed halls. Amidst this vibrant, often frantic, landscape of youthful brilliance moved Arthur Finch. He was a man of quiet dignity, an elderly janitor whose very presence seemed designed to be overlooked. His movements were slow, deliberate, a stark contrast to the hurried pace of the students and faculty. His uniform, a faded blue jumpsuit, seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it, rendering him almost invisible, a ghost in the bustling halls. He swept the polished floors with rhythmic precision, his broom a silent extension of his arm. He mopped away the smudges of countless hurried footsteps, leaving behind a faint, clean scent. He emptied overflowing trash cans, each metallic clang a small punctuation mark in the school's ceaseless symphony. He was meticulous, almost ritualistic, in his duties, performing each task with a focus that suggested it held far greater meaning than mere cleaning. Arthur's lunch breaks were a testament to his isolation, a quiet ritual performed in the rarely used boiler room. The room was a cacophony of gentle hums and soft clicks, the rhythmic breathing of the school's unseen heart. Here, amidst the comforting warmth of the machinery, he would unwrap his modest sandwich from its brown paper bag. But it wasn't the food that truly nourished him. Hidden within the same bag were dense, often esoteric scientific journals. As he chewed slowly, his spectacles perched precariously on the bridge of his nose. His eyes would scan pages filled with complex equations and intricate diagrams. A faint, almost imperceptible smile would play on his lips, a secret flicker of delight as he comprehended the most abstract of theories, the most confounding of cosmic mechanics. The vibrant hum of the boiler was his only companion, its steady pulse a soothing counterpoint to the tempest of knowledge swirling within his mind. One evening, long after the last student had rushed out, leaving behind a trail of backpacks and forgotten textbooks, Arthur was making his final rounds in the quantum physics lab. The room, usually a hive of activity, was now eerily silent, bathed in the cool glow of standby monitors. A group of advanced students had been working late on a complex holographic projector, a marvel of modern educational technology. In their haste and exhaustion, they had left it unplugged, its intricate network of optical fibers precariously balanced on the very edge of a lab table. It was an accidental oversight, a minor slip in the pursuit of ambitious theories. Arthur's gaze, usually fixed on the floor, drifted upwards. He saw the projector, glinting under the ambient light, teetering precariously. Most people would have simply pushed it back, perhaps with a muttered curse about careless teenagers. But Arthur was different. He approached the equipment with an almost reverent solemnity. His calloused hands, usually gripping a mop handle, now moved with an astonishing delicacy. He carefully, almost surgically, secured the unplugged projector, sliding it gently to the center of the table. He checked its connections, ensuring no data would be lost from its memory banks. Then, with a practiced eye, he noticed a slightly bent optical fiber, no thicker than a strand of hair. Without a moment's hesitation, he produced a tiny, almost invisible tool from his pocket, a specialized pair of tweezers, and with a steady hand, he straightened the fiber, its microscopic alignment crucial for the projector's function. He didn't seek recognition for his act. No one was there to witness it. He simply ensured the equipment, a vessel of knowledge, was safe. This small act of precision and care, performed in the solitude of the lab, highlighted his inherent diligence and his profound, silent respect for the pursuit of knowledge. Later that same week, as Arthur was meticulously cleaning the main science lab, his path led him past a whiteboard covered in a complex astrophysics diagram. It was an intricate web of vectors, gravitational equations, and planetary orbits, left over from a particularly challenging lesson on celestial mechanics. He paused, his broom resting gently against the wall. His eyes, usually half-lidded in his perpetual state of quiet observation, sharpened, absorbing the detailed calculations. A faint frown creased his brow. Then, almost unconsciously, he reached out, his hand hovering over the whiteboard. With a quick, almost imperceptible flick of his wrist, he made a tiny correction to a subtle error in an orbital calculation, a minute adjustment that would only be apparent to someone with an intimate understanding of the subject. The chalk mark was barely there, a fleeting whisper of correction. He immediately erased it, his movements swift and furtive, as if afraid of being caught in the act. He moved on, his face impassive, his gaze returning to the dust on the floor. Only the keenest observer, someone with an eye for the improbable, would have noticed the fleeting gesture, the phantom correction on the board. This almost revealed action was a tiny hint, a subtle seeding of the mystery that lay dormant within him, a glimpse of a hidden depth of knowledge, a talent merely slumbering. Arthur always carried a small, worn, leather-bound notebook in his breast pocket, its edges softened by years of handling. No one at Ether Academy had ever seen him open it, much less write in it, but occasionally, in the quiet solitude of the boiler room, or when he thought no one was watching during a late-night shift, he would retrieve it. His fingers, gnarled with age, would carefully turn its brittle pages, and he would jot down a few precise, flowing notes in his elegant, almost calligraphic handwriting. Sometimes it would be a complex mathematical formula, other times a brief, cryptic observation about the nature of the universe, or perhaps a diagram that resembled a celestial map. These private entries were his most guarded secret, reflections of a mind far removed from the mundane tasks he performed. They were the silent chronicles of a life once lived on a grander scale, a life that, for now, remained hidden beneath the faded blue uniform of a janitor. The hum of Ether Academy was usually a steady, almost predictable symphony of ambition and intellectual pursuit. But on a particular Tuesday morning, that rhythm was abruptly fractured in the main hallway, a wide artery of the school where students and staff alike bustled between classes. Sunlight, usually a pristine beam through the large windows, seemed to scatter in disarray as the commotion began. Ethan Hayes, a senior whose sharp mind was matched only by his even sharper tongue, was the epicenter of the disruption. He was a popular figure, one of the school's golden boys, often surrounded by a sycophantic clique. Today, his latest toy, a sleek, expensive drone with a carbon fiber frame and an array of miniature sensors, was the subject of his arrogant display. He'd been showing off its advanced aerial maneuvers, guiding it with casual flicks of his wrist, oblivious to the potential for mishap in such a crowded space. Then, disaster struck. A miscalculation. A sudden gust from a nearby open door, whatever the cause. The drone veered wildly, clipped the edge of a locker, and plummeted to the polished floor with a sickening clatter. The drone lay there, a broken bird. Ethan, his face contorted in a mixture of disbelief and fury, rushed towards it. He knelt, assessing the damage. A crucial component, a miniature gyroscope no larger than his thumbnail, had snapped off. With a tiny, almost imperceptible spin, it rolled across the floor, past 100 pairs of designer sneakers, and vanished beneath a heavy, immovable science display case, a relic from the school's founding days. Ethan, frustrated and embarrassed, tried to retrieve it, stretching his arm, then contorting his body. But the component was just beyond his reach. His jaw tightened in annoyance. Arthur, pushing his cleaning cart with its familiar squeak and rumble, was on his morning rounds, observing the scene unfold from a discreet distance. His eyes, usually fixed on the debris of the floor, had caught the glint of the falling drone. Then, the tiny gyroscope. He watched Ethan's frantic attempts. A flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He knew, with a certainty born of decades of experience, that he could retrieve the component. His mind had already calculated the precise angle and reach required. Ethan, growing increasingly desperate and annoyed by Arthur's slow, methodical movements, finally spotted the janitor. He dismissed Arthur with a dismissive wave of his hand, a casual gesture of superiority that stung more than he could ever know. "Don't bother, old man," Ethan scoffed, his voice dripping with condescension. "You wouldn't understand. This is high-tech stuff, for educated people." His friends, sensing their leader's irritation, snickered in unison. Arthur paused, his broom resting against his hip. The hum of the hallway seemed to fade, replaced by a sudden ringing in his ears. A flicker of something unreadable, perhaps annoyance, perhaps a deep, bone-weary sadness, crossed his face. The comment about being uneducated wasn't just a casual insult. It was a blade twisting in an old, carefully healed wound. It touched a long, dormant pride, a suppressed identity. He hesitated, his internal conflict a silent battle. Part of him, the part that craved anonymity in the quiet peace of his overlooked existence, urged him to simply push his cart past, to pretend he hadn't heard. But another part, a deep-seated instinct to help, fueled by his profound respect for technology and a quiet, simmering disdain for arrogance, tugged at him. He almost walked away, his hand tightening on the broom handle, his jaw set in a silent struggle. But Ethan, oblivious to the internal turmoil he had ignited, pressed on, his impatience turning into outright mockery. "Just stick to your broom, old man," he announced, his voice louder this time, ensuring his audience would hear. "This is for brains, not brawn. You wouldn't know a gyroscope from a doorknob." The laughter of Ethan's cronies, a chorus of adolescent derision, echoed cruelly in the hallway. Students who had been passing by paused, drawn by the spectacle, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. Some offered smirks, others rolled their eyes, all directed at the seemingly helpless janitor. This public humiliation, aimed squarely at his perceived lack of intellect, struck a nerve. It wasn't just about a broken drone part, it was about his worth, his identity, reduced to the stereotype of an unthinking laborer, the casual dismissal of his mind, the assumption of his ignorance, solidified Arthur's resolve. He could no longer return to his invisible existence, not after this. The words, sharper than any physical blow, had shattered the fragile peace he had built around himself. A silent decision was made. He would act, not just to retrieve the component, but to subtly challenge the deeply ingrained stereotype, to plant a seed of doubt in their arrogant assumptions. This was the point of no return, the quiet before the storm had ended. Unbeknownst to Ethan, his father, a renowned tech mogul and a prominent donor to Ether Academy, was a frequent topic of conversation in the Hayes household. Ethan constantly strived to live up to his father's formidable image, often by demonstrating his own intellectual superiority in crude and public ways. He believed that by putting others down, he somehow elevated himself. This background, a delicious piece of dramatic irony, was known only to the reader, adding another layer to Ethan's misplaced arrogance. The stage was set for a confrontation far grander than a simple broken drone. The broken drone component, the miniature gyroscope, had been carefully placed on a dissection tray in the gleaming science lab. The harsh overhead fluorescent lights glinted off its fractured casing, revealing a tangled web of impossibly thin wires and micro-connections. Ethan, his brow furrowed in a mask of intense frustration, hunched over it. He held a pair of delicate tweezers, his hand trembling slightly as he prodded at a particularly stubborn solder joint. He was surrounded by his usual clique, Liam, the jock, whose academic contributions rarely extended beyond agreeable grunts, and Chloe, the sharp-tongued intellectual wannabe, whose self-importance often overshadowed any genuine insight. Their presence, far from being helpful, only intensified Ethan's agitation. He wanted to appear brilliant, effortlessly capable, but the gyroscope stubbornly refused to yield its secrets. Mr. Harrison, the science teacher, a man whose patience was usually as boundless as the universe he taught, stood nearby, his arms crossed, a sigh of exasperation escaping his lips. He was frustrated, not just with the broken component, but with Ethan's increasingly transparent struggle. "This is ridiculous," Ethan muttered, pushing the tweezers away. "It's just a few wires. Why can't I get it?" He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, sweat beading on his forehead despite the lab's cool temperature. It was at this precise moment that Arthur, pushing his cleaning cart with its familiar squeak, entered the lab. The faint scent of disinfectant preceded him. He moved with his usual unhurried pace, a shadow gliding through the periphery of the bustling lab. He didn't interrupt, didn't make his presence known beyond the quiet rumble of his cartwheels. But his eyes, ever observant, immediately fixated on the scene Ethan's struggle, Mr. Harrison's impatience, and the intricately damaged gyroscope. He understood the problem instantly. Ethan, catching sight of Arthur in his peripheral vision, felt a fresh surge of annoyance. He wanted this moment of intellectual triumph to be entirely his, not to be marred by the presence of the school's lowest-ranked employee. "Looks like even your level of education wouldn't help here. Janitor?" Ethan scoffed, turning slightly to ensure his friends, and more importantly, Mr. Harrison, heard him. "This requires real intelligence. Not, well, you know." He gestured vaguely at Arthur's faded uniform, the implication clear. This was beyond the grasp of the uneducated. Arthur paused, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on the handle of his cart. The insult, though familiar, still carried a faint sting. He met Ethan's gaze for a fleeting moment, a spark of something unreadable in his own eyes. Then, his gaze drifted back to the broken gyroscope. His mind, a vast repository of scientific knowledge, processed the intricacies of the component with effortless speed. In a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, a voice that carried the weight of years of unspoken wisdom. Arthur spoke. He didn't boast, didn't explain, didn't even raise his eyes from the object of Ethan's frustration. He simply offered a precise technical observation, as if musing to himself. "Perhaps if you recalibrated the magnetic field around this particular pin." His voice trailed off, as if he shouldn't have spoken, as if he had inadvertently revealed a secret he had long guarded. It was a fragment of a thought, a highly specific piece of advice delivered with humble diffidence. Only two people truly witnessed this. Ethan, initially dismissive, froze. The words, so precise, so technical, coming from the mouth of the janitor, struck him with the force of a physical blow. A janitor, talking about magnetic field recalibration. His mind struggled to reconcile the image of the stooped old man with the sophisticated terminology. He was stunned, a flicker of outrage replacing his frustration. Mr. Harrison, on the other hand, paused mid-sigh. His brow, initially furrowed in exasperation, now creased in thought. He'd seen Arthur's quiet competence before, the perfectly aligned lab equipment, the spotless floors, the faint aura of diligence. But this was different. He was a former research assistant before becoming a teacher, and he recognized the specific terminology Arthur had used. Magnetic field recalibration, in the context of a miniature gyroscope, was not common knowledge. It was advanced physics, a very niche area of electromechanical engineering. A seed of doubt and an intense, burning curiosity was planted in his mind about Arthur. He raised an eyebrow, intrigued, his gaze sweeping from Arthur to the broken component, then back to the seemingly unassuming janitor. Ethan's friends, Liam and Chloe, were too busy snickering at Arthur's perceived audacity to grasp the true depth of his remark. For them, it was just the janitor spouting nonsense, an amusing moment to mock, fueled by a mixture of shock and outrage that a mere janitor would presume to correct him, to even understand the complexities of his advanced drone. Ethan scoffed loudly. He needed to reassert his intellectual superiority, to crush this unexpected challenge to his ego. "What do you know about magnetic fields, old man?" he sneered, his voice laced with venom. "Stick to your mops. That's just ridiculous. You wouldn't know a gyroscope from a doorknob, let alone how to fix one." He dismissed Arthur's advice publicly and with disdain, trying to put Arthur firmly back in his place. He turned to Mr. Harrison, a desperate plea for validation in his eyes. "See, Mr. Harrison, uneducated people just don't understand how things work. They just clean." This public dismissal was aimed squarely at reinforcing Arthur's perceived inferiority and saving Ethan's fragile ego. Arthur, his face unreadable, simply nodded slowly. He picked up his broom and continued sweeping, the soft swish a quiet counterpoint to Ethan's bluster. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just walked away, a silent phantom once more. But as he turned, Mr. Harrison noticed something subtle, almost imperceptible. Arthur's worn, leather-bound notebook, peeking slightly from his breast pocket, lay open for a fleeting second within its pages. Mr. Harrison caught a glimpse of intricate circuit diagrams and complex mathematical equations, drawn with a precision that bordered on artistry. And then he noticed a faint, almost unnoticeable scar on Arthur's right index finger, a thin white line that looked remarkably consistent with a slip during fine wire work, the kind of intricate repair he was now so desperately seeking. A shiver of recognition ran down Mr. Harrison's spine. He didn't know who Arthur was, but he was beginning to suspect he knew what Arthur was. The annual STEM showcase at Ether Academy wasn't just an event. It was a grand spectacle, the pinnacle of the academic year. The main gymnasium, usually echoing with the thud of basketballs, was transformed into a dazzling exhibition hall. Booths bristled with complex projects, holographic displays shimmered, and the air buzzed with the excited chatter of students eager to impress. This was where Ether Academy truly shone, cementing its reputation as a breeding ground for future innovators. For many, it was the stepping stone to elite universities and coveted internships. This was the stage for Ethan Hayes' grand project, a sophisticated weather simulation, the centerpiece of the entire showcase. Designed to predict severe weather patterns with unprecedented accuracy, utilizing his recently repaired drone. The arena was symbolic, a place of intellectual pride and fierce competition, where Arthur's perceived lack of education was most acutely felt, a stark contrast to the brilliance on display. Days before the showcase, a shadow fell over Ethan's meticulously prepared project, a crucial, incredibly rare sensor, the delicate conduit connecting his drone to the main simulation array, malfunctioned. It was a tiny piece of custom-fabricated technology, essential for feeding real-time atmospheric data into his complex model. Ethan, his arrogance still largely intact despite the earlier incident with Arthur, tried to fix it himself. He dismissed the initial warnings from Mr. Harrison, believing his own intellect was sufficient. In his hurried, clumsy attempts, he only made it worse. The tiny, almost invisible wires within the sensor, already fragile, were now frayed and broken beyond conventional repair. The school's tech support department, usually efficient, was swamped with other showcase-related emergencies. The specialized component needed precise, almost artisanal repair, something no one at the school is equipped to do, especially not in time. It wasn't about swapping out a part. It was about intricate micro-soldering and recalibration, a skill possessed by only a handful of highly specialized engineers. Time was ticking, and the possibility of finding an external expert in time was rapidly diminishing. Arthur, sweeping the deserted hallways late one evening, overheard the frantic discussions between Dr. Albright, the school principal, and Mr. Harrison. Their voices, usually composed, were laced with panic. Dr. Albright, a formidable woman whose primary concern was the school's pristine reputation, saw the broken sensor as a direct threat to the showcase's success, and by extension, to Ether Academy's image. She paced her office, her polished shoes clicking sharply on the tiled floor. "Mr. Harrison, you must find a solution. This is Ethan's project, the highlight of the event. We cannot afford a failure, not with all those university scouts attending." She was the misguided adversary type B, her pressure stemming from a fierce protectiveness of the school's standing, not from malice. Arthur listened, his expression unreadable. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he could fix the sensor. The problem was elementary to him, a simple matter of a delicate touch and a practiced hand. But he was still the uneducated janitor, a man whose presence was largely ignored, whose opinions were dismissed. Who would trust him with such a critical, high-stakes repair? The thought of offering his help, of stepping forward and revealing his true capabilities, filled him with a familiar unease. He had chosen this life of anonymity for a reason, seeking quietude away from the demanding spotlight of his past. Yet, the thought of the wasted effort, the potential embarrassment for the students who had worked so hard, gnawed at him. He faced this challenge alone in his knowledge and capability, his internal conflict a silent battle against his desire for peace and his deep-seated instinct to rectify what was broken. The time pressure intensified with each passing hour. The STEM showcase was in 48 hours. If the sensor isn't fixed, Ethan's project, the centerpiece of the event, will fail spectacularly. It will not only embarrass the school, but, more importantly, expose a potential flaw in Ethan's celebrated genius, a notion he desperately cultivated. Dr. Albright's demands grew more frantic, her calls to Mr. Harrison more frequent. "Is there no one who can fix this?" "No one at all," she implored, her voice tight with desperation. Mr. Harrison, burdened by the immense pressure from Dr. Albright, was growing increasingly desperate. He remembered Arthur's earlier insightful comment about the drone's gyroscope, the advanced terminology he'd used. A crazy idea, an improbable hope, flickered in his mind. He decided to act subtly, leaving a detailed, advanced technical manual on a table near Arthur's cleaning cart. An almost imperceptible hint. The manual, an obscure guide to microelectronics and sensor recalibration, was far beyond what any student or even most teachers at Ether Academy would understand. He hoped it would trigger a response from Arthur without directly asking for help from the janitor, preserving Arthur's dignity and his own cautious approach. As he placed the book, he noticed a faint, almost unnoticeable scar on Arthur's right index finger, a thin white line that looked remarkably consistent with a slip during fine wire work, the kind of intricate repair he was now so desperately seeking. A shiver of recognition ran down Mr. Harrison's spine. He didn't know who Arthur was, but he was beginning to suspect he knew what Arthur was. The clock ticked, the pressure mounted. Arthur continued his rounds, sweeping, mopping, polishing, the very picture of an ordinary janitor. But beneath the faded uniform, a brilliant mind was at work, calculating the precise path to restoration, contemplating the delicate balance between his hidden past and the urgent present. The stage was set, the tension thick in the air, and the ultimate test loomed. The air in the gymnasium of Ether Academy crackled with an almost unbearable tension. The STEM showcase was in full swing, a dazzling display of youthful ingenuity and ambition. Students milled about, their voices a symphony of explanations and aspirations. But all eyes, both student and faculty, were now turning towards the main stage. Where Ethan Hayes was moments from his grand presentation, the sophisticated weather simulation, the crowning glory of the event, the entire school's reputation, and more acutely, Ethan's carefully cultivated image of genius, hinged on this moment. Backstage, Dr. Albright paced like a caged tiger, her face a mask of barely suppressed panic. Her eyes darted from the large display screen, which currently showed a blank, ominous blue, to Ethan, who was hunched over the drone, his usually impeccable hair disheveled, sweat beading on his forehead. The crucial sensor was still stubbornly refusing to work. Ethan, his hands trembling slightly, made one last desperate, clumsy attempt at repair. He fumbled with a tiny screwdriver, his movements jerky, and with a soft snap, he heard the ominous sound of yet another microscopic wire giving way. Despair washed over him. The project was dead. Suddenly, a figure moved from the periphery, drawing no immediate attention. Arthur Finch, the seemingly invisible janitor, had quietly taken the initiative. He didn't announce himself, didn't make a grand entrance. He simply approached the display, his worn leather-bound notebook clutched in one hand, a small, specialized set of tools, usually hidden in a secret compartment of his cleaning cart, in the other. He moved with a quiet purpose that belied his age, his steps deliberate and sure. Ethan, catching sight of Arthur, flared with immediate irritation. "What are you doing here, old man?" he snapped, ready with a biting remark, his pride wounded and raw. "You'll just make things worse." Arthur ignored him completely. His gaze, usually downcast, was now fixed on the broken sensor with an almost predatory intensity. He leaned over the display, his presence a stark contrast to the slick, modern equipment. His hands, usually slow and deliberate with a broom, transformed. They became incredibly precise, astonishingly agile, moving with the practiced ease of a master craftsman. The entire lab, students and faculty, who had been watching Ethan's floundering attempts, now watched in stunned disbelief as the janitor began to work. He didn't rush. Every movement is calculated, a testament to decades of honed skill. With the tiny, specialized tools, he meticulously resoldered microscopic wires, his eyes, magnified by his spectacles, focusing with an intensity that belies his age. The air in the gymnasium thickened, as if the very atoms were holding their breath. The only sounds were the soft, almost inaudible clicks of Arthur's tools, and the collective, silent gasp of the audience. He finished the last connection, his hand steady as a rock. The sensor flickered once, a faint green light. Then, to everyone's horror, it went dead. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Ethan's face, moments before contorted in frustration, now twisted into a triumphant smirk. "I told you so," he whispered, a cruel satisfaction in his voice. "Just a clumsy old man." Dr. Albright, backstage, closed her eyes in despair, her shoulders slumping. It seemed Arthur had failed, confirming everyone's cynical expectations. But then, Arthur, with a serene look that suggested a secret knowledge, gently tapped a tiny, almost invisible chip on the sensor. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. The chip had been subtly dislodged, a minute detail only a truly experienced eye would catch. And as his finger lifted, a faint, almost imperceptible NASA logo was revealed, subtly engraved on the side of the tiny chip, a private mark he had etched there himself years ago, a signature of his past, a detail that now, in this crucial moment, gleamed under the spotlights. The sensor immediately lit up with a steady, vibrant green glow. A soft whirring sound emanated from the drone as its components powered on. And then, spectacularly, the complex atmospheric model on the main screen flickered to life, showing an accurate, real-time weather prediction, the intricate patterns of wind and rain swirling across the display. It was a spectacular comeback, a resurrection of what had seemed irrevocably broken. The shift in the crowd is instantaneous. A palpable wave of awe sweeping through the gymnasium. Ethan's smirk vanishes, replaced first by utter shock, then by a grudging, reluctant awe that twisted his features. Dr. Albright's face transforms from despair to stunned disbelief, her eyes widening, then to overwhelming relief and finally, profound admiration as she stared at the janitor who had just saved her showcase. The students, who moments before had been whispering dismissively, now gasp in astonishment. Murmurs erupted, a mixture of disbelief and wonder. "Who is he?" someone whispered. "How did he do that?" Another murmured, their voices hushed in reverence. Mr. Harrison, with tears glistening in his eyes, simply nods, a knowing smile gracing his lips. He had seen the brilliance flicker, and now it shone. The general disbelief that had clouded the room just seconds before melted away, morphing into thunderous applause that erupted spontaneously, building into a deafening roar. It was a standing ovation, validating Arthur's expertise and publicly vindicating him in the most spectacular fashion possible. The quiet janitor had just commanded the attention and the respect of an entire academy. The thunderous applause eventually subsided, but the reverberations of Arthur's quiet brilliance lingered, reshaping the atmosphere in Ether Academy. The reveal of the tiny NASA logo on the repaired sensor, a detail caught by many in the immediate aftermath, had swept through the audience like wildfire, fueling the awe and igniting a frenzy of whispered speculation. The uneducated janitor was suddenly the most talked-about person in the school, his past a tantalizing mystery. Ethan Hayes, his face a canvas of conflicting emotions, was utterly humbled. The swagger that usually defined him had completely evaporated, replaced by a raw, uncharacteristic vulnerability. He found Arthur backstage, amidst the lingering buzz of the showcase, his usual clique strangely absent. "Mr. Finch," Ethan began, his voice barely a whisper, devoid of its usual arrogant edge. He swallowed hard, struggling to form the words. I don't know what to say. I was completely wrong about you. About everything. My remarks were despicable. I'm truly sorry for what I said, for how I treated you." His gaze, no longer filled with condescension, now held a hint of genuine respect, even shame. He understood now that true intellect wasn't about public displays or expensive gadgets, but about the profound depth of knowledge and the quiet dignity with which it was wielded. The weight of his father's expectations, which had always fueled his arrogance, now seemed a trivial concern compared to the intellectual chasm he'd just witnessed. Dr. Albright, still reeling from the unexpected triumph and the subsequent revelation, approached Arthur, her posture, usually so rigid, now softened by humility. "Mr. Finch," she began, her voice tinged with both awe and regret. "I owe you a profound apology for my oversight, for the school's failure to recognize your true value, and for allowing such prejudice to fester within these halls." She extended a hand, her expression one of genuine gratitude. "What you did today, it was extraordinary. It saved us from disaster. But more than that, it opened our eyes." She paused. Then, with a sincerity that touched Arthur, she continued, "We would be honored, truly honored, if you would consider joining us in a more formal capacity, perhaps as a senior technical consultant, or a mentor for our advanced STEM students. Your expertise is invaluable, a treasure we should have recognized sooner." Arthur, for the first time in years, felt a stir of something beyond the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. He considered the offer, the prestige, the money. Those held no allure for him now. He had found peace in his anonymity. But the thought of sharing his vast knowledge, of rekindling a spark in young minds, that was a different matter. He had suppressed his passion for science for so long, opting for a life of quiet reflection. This was a chance to reconnect with the very essence of who he was, to finally give purpose to his retirement in a way that resonated with his deepest values. "I would be honored, Dr. Albright," Arthur replied, his voice soft but firm, a small smile playing on his lips. "But I would prefer to remain part-time, and my interest is not in the accolades, but in the genuine pursuit of knowledge." He accepted the offer to become a part-time STEM mentor for students interested in advanced engineering and physics. This opportunity was deeply meaningful because it allowed him to share his vast knowledge and passion for science, something he had suppressed for years. It's not just a job, it's a chance to re-engage with the scientific community on his own terms, to inspire and to guide without the burden of past pressures. A few days later, after the whirlwind of the showcase had subsided, Arthur and Mr. Harrison had a quiet conversation in the now clean and orderly science lab, the setting of Arthur's quiet vindication. The sun streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "Arthur," Mr. Harrison began, his voice low, filled with a mixture of wonder and bewilderment. Why did you keep it all hidden for so long? A mind like yours. Wasted. It breaks my heart to think of all those years." He gestured vaguely at the lab, then at the empty hallways. Arthur looked at his worn, calloused hands that had once guided complex machinery into space, now accustomed to wielding a mop. "After the space program slowed down, the world changed. I wanted a quiet life, away from the spotlight, the politics, the immense pressure. I found peace here. Mr. Harrison, in the quiet hum of the machines, in the order of things." He gestured around the meticulously clean lab, and perhaps I needed a reminder of why knowledge truly matters, why it should be pursued with humility, not just for accolades or financial gain. Ethan's arrogance, in a strange way, became my catalyst. It forced me to remember the true purpose of science. "But the sheer waste, Mr. Harrison insisted, shaking his head. "All those years of brilliance, just sweeping floors." Arthur offered a gentle, knowing smile. "Not wasted, Mr. Harrison. Just dormant. Sometimes, the quietest observations are the most profound. And who knows, perhaps now, I can truly ignite some sparks, not just in young minds, but in the very spirit of this place." His eyes, usually veiled, now held a genuine warm glow, hinting at the depths of his long-suppressed passion. During the school's public apology, Ethan's father, a renowned tech mogul, made a surprise appearance. Having heard the sensational news of the janitor's true identity, and ever the astute businessman, he saw an opportunity. He publicly offered Arthur a lucrative consulting position at his tech company, emphasizing that he wanted to learn from the best. However, Arthur politely declined, preferring to stay at Ether Academy. His decision underscored his renewed commitment to the purity of education and mentorship over corporate gain, cementing his new path and setting the stage for his inspiring future. The new calm had settled, a calm born of truth, humility, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. 2 years later, Ether Academy, once a bastion of competitive intellect and quiet academic pressure, now hummed with a different kind of energy. The gleaming glass walls still reflected ambition, but it was an ambition tempered by genuine curiosity and collaborative spirit. Arthur Finch, once the anonymous janitor, was now affectionately known as Professor Finch, a beloved and revered figure who had, in his quiet way, revolutionized the school's approach to science and technology. He no longer pushed a cleaning cart. Instead, he held informal lab sessions in the very science lab he once meticulously cleaned, its pristine surfaces now often cluttered with active projects and buzzing with the excited chatter of students. His classes, initially attended by curious few, now overflowed with eager students, drawn by his profound knowledge and his unique ability to explain complex concepts with disarming simplicity. He had transformed the school's STEM program, introducing hands-on projects that encouraged experimentation and failure as stepping stones to discovery. He fostered a culture where genuine curiosity and collaboration were valued above cutthroat competition, where students no longer chased only grades but the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake. Ethan Hayes, once the arrogant teenager, was now a humbled and diligent student. The fall from his self-proclaimed intellectual pedestal had been a necessary, if painful, lesson. He no longer scoffed at the uneducated. Instead, he often sought Arthur's advice, his questions now born of genuine intellectual curiosity and profound respect. Their relationship had transformed from one of antagonism and dismissal to a deep, meaningful mentorship, a testament to the power of humility and second chances. Ethan, inspired by Arthur, even started a small robotics club, showing a new dedication to practical application over theoretical posturing. Arthur, in his new role, realized that his unique journey had given him a profound understanding of the barriers that prevent access to knowledge. He established the Finch Fellowship, a scholarship program designed for underprivileged students who demonstrated a passion for science but lacked the financial means to pursue their dreams. He personally mentored these students, sharing his wisdom, opening doors, and ensuring that their potential wouldn't be squandered. Beyond the academy, he also volunteered his time at a local community center, teaching basic science principles to adults who had never had the opportunity for a formal education. He believed that knowledge was a universal right, not a privilege, and he dedicated himself to ensuring that it was accessible to all, regardless of background or past circumstances. He wasn't just a mentor, he was a humanitarian, sharing his knowledge and inspiring new generations, and proving that the light of learning could illuminate any path. The story culminates on a warm spring evening. Arthur, now Professor Finch, stands by the same large window in the main science lab, the setting of his dramatic unveiling. He's no longer alone, nor is he holding a broom. Instead, a diverse group of students is gathered around him, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a projector. He points towards the vast, starry night sky, explaining a complex astrological phenomenon, perhaps the subtle dance of distant galaxies or the intricate mechanics of a nebula's formation, with simple, captivating language that brings the cosmos within their grasp. His eyes, full of a quiet joy, reflect the distant stars, each one a tiny beacon of the knowledge he now freely shared. A student, perhaps a younger version of Ethan, but now full of genuine curiosity and wonder, looks up at him, then back at the infinite expanse of the sky. A spark of pure fascination ignites in their eyes, mirroring the passion that had long lain dormant within Arthur himself. The gentle hum of the holographic quantum projector, no longer a source of stress but a tool for boundless learning, resonates softly in the background. It is an image of knowledge being passed down, of light replacing darkness, and of the profound impact one humble individual can have on countless lives, guiding them towards the infinite possibilities of the universe. The second spring has truly arrived, vibrant and full of promise. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.